Gentile's younger brother was Giovanni Bellini, and he is extremely famous artist from Venice, probably the most famous artist of Venice in the 15th century. He is known for his use of oil glazes, oil paint on panel. And of course, where did he learn it? Well, one of the ideas is certainly that he learned it from Antonella Damascena. And there's, like I say, at least a temporal coincidence that after Antonella in Messina, that after Antonella da Messina is in Venice, Bellini is painting with oil paints. It's also possible that he learned it from Netherlandish examples. But however he learned it, we see that rich color and the luminosity or light that is possible with oil paints. So directly or indirectly, the influence of the Netherlands is now very important in Venice. The Venetians, of course, become famous for their use of oil paint and luminous color. And I wanted to show you just a few of these half-length Madonnas that are painted by Giovanni Bellini. This particular image is from the National Gallery in London. And I think I use this one because it shows the richness of the color. And here are two other images. One, the one that is on the right, is fairly early in Bellini's practice. And the other one you can see is a bit later. And so you can see how his style develops from a style that's quite close to Mantegna's, sort of this hard-edged forms, to something that is softer with richer color. This is another picture that is from his earlier period, when he has been influenced by his brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law is Mantegna. Mantegna married the Bellini sister, the daughter of Jacopo and the sister of Giovanni and Gentile. So he was very much influenced by the art of his brother-in-law. So you have these forms here that are very hard-edged, sculptural, and yet even here in this Pietà, we do see Giovanni Bellini's love of landscape in the background and a kind of subtlety of color, where the skin tones of Christ, as he's now dead, he's being held up as a kind of man of sorrows. We have the edge of the tomb in front as almost like a balustrade. And Mary is embracing her son, his dead body. Her face is cheek to cheek with Christ, something that we often see in Lamentations, where Christ is laid out on the ground or on the lap of Mary. And then, of course, there is John holding up Christ. This is a devotional image. There is a subject called the Man of Sorrows, showing Christ either dead or suffering with his wounds, with the crown of thorns. And it refers to a section from Isaiah, that I am a man of sorrows. And it is a devotional image in which you are supposed to weep in front of the picture. The inscription translates, "When these swelling eyes evoke groans, this work of Giovanni Bellini could shed tears," which you could almost see that as instructions. When you see this, think about the death of Christ. Realize, that is the sins of mankind, including the viewers, that caused this, and you should shed tears. Just to illustrate how Bellini was influenced by his brother-in-law and how their styles differ, I brought in two works of the same subject. They're both in your textbook. The one on the left is Mantegna's Agony in the Garden, or Christ in Gethsemane. And the one on the right is the same subject by Bellini, Giovanni Bellini. And you can see that Bellini is also using some foreshortening, the spatial considerations that Mantegna does. And he has these very hard-edged forms. And yet there's something else going on here, and that is the use of light. The sun is setting in the background. The landscape, hard though it may be, is bathed in light. And even the little angel that delivers the cup, Christ prays, "Let this cup pass from me," praying that he does not have to be crucified. And you have this little transparent angel bearing the cup in Bellini's version of the Agony in the Garden. In Mantegna's, you have a whole troop of angels coming, showing the cross, really showing what Christ is going to have to experience. Well, as Bellini's style developed, as he learned oil paint and was able to use the softness of the shadows and the richness of the colors and the luminous lighting effects, as I say, his style changes. It's no longer that hard-edged, rigid forms. He develops a great kind of softness and a monumentality in his art. What is really the cusp of the High Renaissance. He brings the High Renaissance to Venice, as it were. And this is one of his beautiful Madonnas. He has so many Madonnas enthroned. This is the Frari Madonna, as it's often called, because it is in the church of Santa Maria Glorioso dei Frari, Saint Mary the Glorious of the Friars, the Franciscan church, Franciscan friars. Which is a church that contains many, many artworks by Titian, Bellini, Donatello, Vivarini. Today it's still a church. It's definitely a church, but it also is a repository of beautiful artwork. So this is the original frame, and you can see he's used that illusion that you have a series of piers supporting an entablature and an arch in the center, and that the figures are standing within that created pictorial space. You have these monumental forms of the saints on either side, one overlapping the other. Some of you know that this influenced Durer in his painting of the four apostles. And in the center, of course, you have this beautiful image of Mary, the mother, holding the Christ child with the little musical angels at the footstep of her throne. Now, she's shown as though she is in an apse of a church, the curving eastern end of the church in which the altar would be placed. But instead of an altar, what we have is the Madonna enthroned, and she serves as the Ara Dei, or the altar of God, or the Aracole, the altar of heaven, which are two of the names of Mary. And just as the altar holds the body and blood of Christ in the Eucharistic sacrifice, she is holding her son here as the altar with the sacrificial bread, which is actually the body of Christ, the Christ child is shown here. Try to get brought you a picture that I had taken, and I've done a little adjustment with it, but I wanted you to get the idea of light shining on this picture, because that is definitely part of the work of art. You have in the background of the apse a conch of the apse, or the half dome of the apse, that is painted to look as though it has golden mosaics that reflect light. And of course you would see these in San Marco. Venice is a city of light and color. You have light shining off the water of the canals, off the palazzi, off the golden mosaics in San Marco. And Bellini, of course, shows this beautiful light. A work that also shows light and landscape is Bellini's St. Francis of Assisi, or also known as the Ecstasy of St. Francis. In it, you see this panoramic landscape with these rocky striations of rock in the foreground, very realistic. Some people have pointed out that it looks very much like the place where near Assisi, where Francis received the Stigmata. Others point out that there is a Jan van Eyck painting that has rocks that are constructed somewhat the same way. So did he get it from another artwork? Did he get it from an actual landscape? In the foreground, you have St. Francis with his arms outstretched, and the light shines down on him. St. Francis, I call St. Francis everybody's favorite saint. Maybe not. Maybe he's not everybody's, but he's certainly one of the most popular saints. And he is the patron saint, as you probably know, the patron saint of animals. And he's also now the patron saint of ecology. And Francis loved nature. He talked about all of creation being his brothers and sisters, that we are all created. God has created man. God has created brother ass. He's created brother ass. In other words, the donkey who is back there. He refers to brother ass. He has created brother sun and sister moon. And so we have this poem, song in praise of God. And Francis has written the Canticle of the Sun, in which the sun and the moon and all of creation praise God. Venetian painters, specifically Bellini and his presumptive pupil Giorgione, become known for their beautiful landscape paintings, always with figures in them. It's a Renaissance art, so the subject of art is the human figure. Now, what is the subject of this? We're not quite certain. One idea is that it is Francis who has written the Canticle of the Sun, and now he is singing or chanting the Canticle of the Sun, and in his belt you'll see a little folded piece of paper or parchment, presumably what that is written on. The other idea is that perhaps he is receiving the Stigmata. We do see the Stigmata, just very small holes, not very gory here at all, with restraint in the hands and the visible foot of Francis. And he's looking up to the light that seems to be shining in from the upper left corner and shines on him and shines on the rocks. And so it has been suggested that that light is, the light of God, and is symbolic of the vision that Francis had. The Stigmata are the wounds of Christ, which Francis received in his body. And he had a vision, and in this vision he saw a seraph. And how this is always portrayed in art is as Christ on the cross with the 6 wings of a seraphim. And here we can see one of Giotto's picture of the stigmatization of St. Francis. And rays of light are coming from the wounds of Christ to the appropriate place in Francis. Francis was believed to be an imitatio Christi, be imitating Christ even in his own body, where he took on the wounds of Christ. So in this particular interpretation, the light stands for the vision and shines in on Francis. Bellini is, as I said, famous for painting these beautiful pictures of the Madonna and Child enthroned, surrounded with saints. They're known as sacred conversations, sacra conversations. We talked about that with Domenico Veneziano. And this is his San Giobbe Madonna. It's called that because it was created for the hospital of San Giobbe. San Giobbe means Saint Job, and generally we don't think of Job as a saint, but in Venice he was honored with that appellation. He was considered to be a saint. And so we see Job as this figure in the foreground, wearing only a loincloth and with the beard. He is on not the far left, which we see St. Francis of Assisi, and then St. John the Baptist, and then St. Job. Now, what you're actually looking at is not how it appears today. The framework is no longer on this painting. It is now in the Museum of the Accademia in Venice. And what this is a digital reconstruction where they have placed it in what would have been the original framework. And you may notice that the actually digitalized, but what is supposed to be the actual architecture is then repeated in the painting. And you have this wonderful illusion that you are looking into a barrel-vaulted room. Mary, of course, is seated in the apse of the church. She is the Ara Dei, or the altar of God, the Oracole, the altar of heaven, and Christ is as the Eucharistic sacrifice on the altar. Here, Christ is on her lap. There's the musical angels, very popular motifs going back at least to Masaccio, very popular in Bellini's art, and the other saints. You can see Saint Sebastian, Saint Dominique, and a bishop's saint. The figures are monumental. The whole picture is about 15 feet high, a little bit bigger. And the figures are appropriate for the scale of the architecture, and yet they are not tiny. There is another picture here that I want to show you. This is the Madonna and Child Enthroned, known as the Saint Zacharias, or San Zaccaria Madonna. And that's the figure in red there is St. Zacharias. And it's the same thing, only it is still in sitia. And you have a picture in your book of what it looks like in the room. And so you have this architectural structure that is the frame. And once again, it is painted. And so it appears that the arch comes over and you have actually a view out into a landscape, although it appears to be the arch of a church. This one perhaps gives you the glow of the color because it has been restored and cleaned, and so I'm trying to give you a little bit of the effect of the glow of the oil colors. This is painted considerably later, about 1506, but the format is very similar to the San Giobbe Madonna.